Hello and welcome. My name is Scott Gross, and I'm joined by Superintendent Brian Balke, and we're going to be talking today about the warrant articles that will appear on the ballot on March 10th. So for those of you who want to know, the election will take place on March 10th at Bartlett Elementary School and Goffstown High School. The polls are open between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., and it's critical that you bring the proper identification with you for when you vote. And Brian, would you be kind enough to share with the viewers, what is the purpose of these videos?
Yeah, Scott. So we've done this now for over 10 years, that we've created these videos to try to provide information to voters so that they can be informed when they go to the polls. And Scott, it's really important to me that we clarify that this video is for informational purposes. We're not trying to influence or to sway anyone, and we're trying to provide factual information so that people can be informed when they go to the polls and they vote on the school district warrant.
Well, thank you, Brian. And today I'm joined by school board member Jerry Talbot and business administrator Doug Totten, and we're going to be talking about the warrant articles that are going to appear on the ballot this coming March. As you can see, we have article number 1, which will be election of officers. We're going to be discussing shortly warrant article number 2, which is the district operating budget. And then following that, HR Director Kate McGrath and Superintendent Brian Balke will be talking about the GEA collective bargaining agreement, as well as warrant article 4, which is the request for a special meeting, should that bargaining unit not pass at the polls. And then following up with that, article number 5, Doug will discuss the capital reserve fund deposit. And then lastly, Brian Balke, our superintendent, will be discussing a new warrant article with regard to open enrollment. So now we're going to be discussing warrant article number 2, which is the operating budget. And before we do that, Doug, I know there's a lot of information that viewers and our voters can go onto the website. So talk us through where this information is and what's in these folders that they might see.
Yeah, so you can see there's a QR code up here on the screen right now, as well as people could search Goffstown School District, New Hampshire, and they could click on the finance button and then go to election information in March of 2026. So we're now multiple months into the budget. So instead of going to March election information, if you went to proposed budgets, you could kind of see how we walk through the school board and then the budget committee with PowerPoint slides, as well as line by line budgets as well.
So the school board, obviously the school district really cares about transparency. So all these documents are there for the voters to review. So as we start off, Jared, I wanted to talk to you about the cost per pupil, because that is a metric that the state uses. It compares school districts, apple to apple on that. And, on this particular slide, it's talking about the cost per pupil. And if you could just walk us through this one.
Yeah, one of the great things about New Hampshire is we're able to compare towns against towns, like you just said. So, how much were we spending on transportation? How much are we spending for special education? So when we go through and we look at a district's operating budget, the first thing we have to do in order to do the comparisons is remove the bonds that each district has, as well as the transportation, so that we can clearly understand what the cost per pupil is. So the state average for cost per pupil is at $22,699. Goffstown that we have is $17,811. So you can clearly see we're spending a lot less per pupil here in Goffstown than the state average is.
And with that, I'm going to go to the next slide. And what you're going to see here is that it's kind of broken down a little bit further. So there are 156 elementary schools in the state of New Hampshire, and Goffstown's elementary schools are the 16th lowest cost per pupil in the state. Further, Mountain View Middle School, it's the only middle school in Goffstown. It is the lowest cost per pupil in the state, and it's almost $5,200 below the state average. And then lastly, Goffstown High School has the third lowest cost per pupil in the state of New Hampshire. And it's about $4,300 below the state average. So by all of the metrics that the state uses, Goffstown's costs are far less. So now going forward to our next slide, this is what you're going to see on the ballot. And Doug, we see new language this year. There's state test scores. Tell us a little bit about why this is going to appear on the ballot.
Yeah, so a new state law, which is presented in the RSA at the top, requires all school districts to present not only the cost per pupil, but then the proficiency levels for testing. So in New Hampshire, we use the SAS test, and that gives you proficiency scores on English language arts, mathematics, and science. So not only will you see this in Goffstown, but if you were to look at anyone else's ballot in the state, you would see how their school district is doing as well.
All right. So now as we go on to this next slide, I want to talk about the budget areas. So we budget in different areas. So what you'll see as you go through the budgets online is we have a district budget, and the district budget, it accounts for a lot, Doug. So it includes all of our transportation, both regular and special education. It includes all of out-of-district placements. So anything we have to send a student who has special needs to an out-of-district placement. It includes all of those costs. It includes all of the contracted services. So if we have to provide speech services and we can't hire, say, a speech pathologist, those costs are included there. It includes the SAU management costs. It also includes all of our district-wide IT expenditures, property liability insurance. So the district budget is a large component of the budget, but it includes a lot there. The others, we break it down, as you can see, by school. And then lastly, we separate out food service, and then we also have a grants budget. So that's what you'll see when you look through the budget. In this next slide, Doug, if you could just kind of walk us through, it appears to be there are 3 different funds that they'll see when we look at our budget.
Yeah, so as you were talking on the last slide, you talked a lot about the district budget, and then you talked about each of the schools as well, so the 5 schools. So those together make up the general fund, and that's where eventually that comes in the taxation part of for the local people of Goffstown. And then 2 other funds are the food service and the special revenue fund. Both of those are not raised through taxation. So for food service, it's the revenue that comes in from the students and the federal government, and that takes care of all the expenses. And special revenue are grants that come from the federal government and the state. And again, the goal of that and the requirement of that is that we don't spend more than we receive in grants. So a lot of times we spend a lot of focus on the general fund budget. And as you can see, between the default and the proposed, there's a difference of $336,922.
So, Jared, you mentioned this at the deliberative session when you did the presentation. Can you just walk us through in terms of these are the 2 big things in terms of our budgets are personnel driven heavily, and insurance, things like that?
Yeah. So the first thing to really hammer home on this one, Scott, is there are no new positions in this budget. We do recognize that there are needs within the schools. Usually we're shifting resources or shifting personnel from one school to another or from one department to another. So there are no new employees that are coming in. The second item that we have is a reduction that happened through the process. The school board gets kind of what the administration wants for a budget. We review it at the school board level. Then we send it on to the budget committee, which is more of a municipal group. They took a look at that and they said, hey, wait a minute, guys. We see that you're consistently underspending on what you're forecasting for your health insurance. And so one of the things that the budget committee came back with is your empirical evidence. The history is we think this should be a little bit less. So they motioned to reduce the proposed budget down by $500,000. And the school board accepted that. We kind of said, okay, yeah, that's understandable. We don't want to collect taxes for the $500,000 and give it back at the end of the year. So let's just not do that. So that was kind of the 2 takeaways that we had from going through the budget committee process.
Excellent. And Jared, if you would mind just kind of continuing on with this next slide where we talk about these are the 4 major drivers in this particular budget. If you could just walk the viewers through these.
Yeah. So even though there's a difference of $336,000 between the default and the proposed, there's major drivers happening for our proposed and sometimes our default budget. One of the things is our vocational tuition that we would give for MST. So those are those students that are going to the Manchester School of Technology.
for trades.
Exactly. So we want to make sure that we have well-rounded students. Not everybody's going to go to college. We recognize that. So they're going for woodworking. They're going for HVAC. They're going for those technical skills at the Manchester schools. And so that increase of $250,000 is something that was really passed on to us. That's really important. For this year, I think we had 106 students that went into that vocational school. We don't want to limit that. So that's why it's important that we have that money there.
And I think, just to highlight that, more and more students across the state of New Hampshire are seeking education through vocational means, through the trade schools within the state. However, the state budget, it's every 2 years, they only budgeted for a certain finite amount of money. So as the number of students grows, the state cannot contribute as much. So that will hopefully be a request of our state legislature and others to increase that funding to meet that demand. The other drivers that we're also seeing, if you can bring that slide back, at IT, right, that's another big one. Whereby whether it be the cost of technology or the software in particular, our special ed transportation increased $320,000. And then, Doug, the last one was we entered into we spent about $3 million upgrading our boilers and our energy, our heating controls, et cetera, to make the buildings more efficient. So, we're seeing $40,000 to $50,000 of energy savings, but with that, we have a municipal lease, which we have to account for on that one. So those are the four kind of major drivers that we're seeing in the budget. And lastly, Doug, I'm going to turn to you to talk about the tax rate impact. And this is always tricky because these are estimated tax rate impacts. And the slide that you have before you, it has a column for the projected tax rate and then the actual tax rate. So can you just walk us through, what the expected tax rate is going to be should the article pass for the operating budget?
Great, thanks. Yeah, so going off of the valuation of the town and increasing it by 0.5%, what we have is for about every $100,000 of new spending would be a result of 4 cents per thousand of what your house is valued at. So we can look at both the proposed and the default budget in this case. So for the proposed budget, that would increase taxes by 40 cents from where they currently are. So for a median house of $416,600, that would be an increase of about $167 per year. The default budget would increase your taxes by about 28 cents. So for that same median house, that would be an increase of $117 per year.
And that is for the operating budget only.
Operating budget only.
Okay. So with that, I want to remind folks about where they'll be voting. So on March 10th is Election Day, and the polling places are Bartlett Elementary School and Goffstown High School. The polls open at 7 a.m. and they close sharply at 7 p.m. It is very important for voters to bring proper identification, with them. And with that, I want to thank Jared and Doug for, spending time and informing the voters about the warrant article. Now we'll be discussing warrant articles number 3 and 4, which deal with the collective bargaining agreement between the teachers and the Goffstown School District. And I'm joined by Kate McGrath and Superintendent Brian Balke. And Kate, we're going to talk about this agreement. It's a 4-year agreement, as I understand it. And we're going to talk about the reasons for it. But who makes up the Goffstown Educational Association?
Yeah, the Goffstown Education Association is made up of our teachers as well as our other professional staff. So related service providers like physical therapists and occupational therapists, school counselors, all of the professional licensed positions.
And Brian, every time that you go into any type of contract negotiations, you're talking about what are the priorities for the school district and the community at large. So can you share with the viewers, what were the main focal points of the priorities for this particular agreement?
Yeah, there were a number of priorities that were identified by the school board, Scott, as part of this contract negotiation. So that includes addressing teacher fair labor market costs. So, Scott, there's a teacher shortage right now. There's less and less people going into public education. We're seeing declines in the number of teacher preparation programs as well as the students attending those programs. So we really wanted to focus this contract on having good, strong, fair wages so that we could attract and retain quality teachers. And really two things, Scott. So we were seeking to have our entry-level teachers, new teachers starting out, to get them up to or over $50,000 as an entry salary. Right now, we're considerably under that for our teachers. And the second goal was to get all of our teachers to the 50th percentile based on benchmarking of neighboring communities. These are the towns we're competing against. So we want to be 50th percentile, kind of middle of the road, and be able to offer our teachers a fair compensation package. There were also some other language changes and things that Mrs. McGrath will get to as we go further in the presentation.
So this is no different than any other type of industry. You're trying to be competitive and making sure that you can attract and retain, employees as best you can. So with that, Kate, I'm going to kind of turn to you for this next slide that we're going to show the viewers. And this really talks about the benchmarking of neighboring towns. So this is all about that competitiveness. So can you speak to, where we're at right now and what the goals were to get us to that 50th percentile?
Yeah. So, Scott, as the superintendent described, our goal was to get to the 50th percentile for our neighboring towns. So this slide outlines for us the towns that we benchmark against. And as you can see, if we focus just on the bachelor's tracks and the master's tracks, which is BA and MA in the columns that are presented there, we're currently about 6% below the 50th percentile for bachelor's and about 3.5% below for the master's. That's our starting wages. So again, our goal was to try and get up to the 50th percentile, again, that middle of the road, making sure we have a competitive opportunity.
And we're going to share a couple of other slides. So Kate, talk to me a little bit about this one. This is the BA stands for the bachelor's track. So you talked before about these competitive towns around us. That could be Hooksett, Merrimack, Bedford, Londonderry, Concord, etc. On this graph, tell us what we're seeing.
Yeah, so this is a sampling of the slide before. So the slide before showed the aggregate of the 50th percentile and where we lined up against those benchmark towns. This slide here is giving you a range where you can see we're as much as almost 8,700 below a town like Concord, city like Concord, and within $2,000 of a town like Merrimack. So this just breaks down that benchmarking in a little bit more detail to show you the competitive nature of those benchmark towns.
So Brian, as you were mentioning before about that one goal, starting pay of $50,000, this graph is what illustrates the need to do that because our surrounding communities are paying more than we are, and we have to hit a certain minimum target. On the flip side, Kate, we also have the top end. And most of our teachers have a master's degree, fair enough to say. So we're going to go to the next slide. And on this next slide, this is the master's level. So MA stands for master's. And here, as you can see, the discrepancy on the high end with the Concord School District is $16,000.
Yeah, almost twice where it is at the beginning starting wages on the bachelor's end. So we had work to do trying to get to that 50th percentile.
And then all the way to the far left is Hooksett. So they were the only community that we have used as a benchmark community where they were lower than us for the high end.
In this sampling.
In this particular sampling.
Yes.
So this is, again, was driving a lot of the negotiations, a lot of the priorities for the school district as they were negotiating with the teachers union. On this next slide, I'd like to show you why the data is so important. And Brian, you mentioned earlier on about, the fact that we're seeing less teachers, apply. It's a competitive market. And when you look at this graph, it is so telling. In 2016, there was, 278 applicants for, let's say, an elementary teaching position. Fast forward 10 years later, and it's like 90% less. Almost.
It is scary. It's scary, Scott. So as somebody who cares about public education, it's very alarming that there aren't new people, young people going into this profession. But be that as it may, we have a need to staff our buildings to make sure we have teachers hired. And so what we see in this graph, Scott, is in 2016, we would have almost 300 applications. And now we're lucky if we get a half a dozen qualified applications. And unfortunately, this is a trend that we're seeing play throughout all of our positions, all of our open positions. So I think really this warrant article just seeks to put us in the middle of the road so that we can hopefully offer a nice, competitive wage to our teachers. We recognize that we can't be, maybe some of we can't probably put as much money on the table as other communities, and that's okay. But we want to take care of people that are here.
Yeah. And I want to go back to that slide. And Kate, the lower part of that slide, we talk about the teacher prep programs. And we've also seen a decrease in that. So this also tells a story, right?
It does. So for every town that we're competing with, we're seeing the reduction in applications that's outlined above that the superintendent just spoke to. But the teacher prep enrollment itself is down. So when we look at a 10-year period from 2011 to 2012, you can see that the New Hampshire enrollment is down by about a third.
Yeah. So these graphs are like a stark reminder to me of like college economics classes, scarcity, supply and demand. A little bit, it makes you a little bit nervous. And I think these are the market pressures that we're dealing with in the educational world. On this next slide, this is the cost breakdown. And I think when you look at the cost of this contract, Kate, if you can kind of talk to us about, it's a 4-year contract, what the costs are. And also, I think that folks will see automatically that the first year of this contract has a much higher cost than the subsequent 3 years. And that is primarily to get to those targets and to be competitive, right?
That's correct, Scott. So again, trying to reach that 50th percentile in year one. When we're hiring, that reduced number of applications that we're getting, and then how many of those are actually qualified to do the role, this will help us position so that we can hire for the duration of the contract. And then it's continuing to keep the wages at that competitive 50th percentile. So this slide is a little bit different than the first slide we looked at with the 4-year costs in the warrant, because it also breaks down the associated costs for voters to see.
Right. And I'm going to go to the next slide. And this really talks about the tax impact. And one of the things that's important is that this particular contract is funded by not only general fund dollars, but also by grant dollars, which then offsets the amount needed for taxation. But with that, we wanted to let the voters know that the net cost that's going to be raised by taxation is about $1.6 million. So for the median house in Goffstown, this will be approximately $242 an annual cost, or a monthly cost of about $20 a month for this contract. We want to be transparent and let folks know as to what these costs are. But that being said, this is part of the costing for this 4-year contract. So if voters do have any questions about this particular contract, we do have a more detailed information on the district's website, and they can, certainly, reach out to the SAU or school board members if they have any questions. All right, and now we're going to be talking about Warrant Article 4, which is a corollary to Warrant Article 3, which is the teachers' CBA. And this article essentially asks voters if they would like to have another vote should the warrant article for the CBA fail at the polls. It allows for permission to hold a special election for the sole purpose of reconsidering a CBA with the teachers union. So again, it's pretty simple on that one. Hi, I'm now here with Doug Totten, who's the business administrator, and we'll be talking about the deposit into the Capital Reserve Fund, which is warrant article number 5. So Doug, what should we know about this one?
So the Capital Reserve Fund is a way for us to look at our capital improvements that we need at each of the 5 buildings. So a team comes together and creates a capital improvement plan, which is also on our website. And what they're looking to do is to kind of map out what we need to do in a proactive basis, as well as a reactive basis to some of the things that age at a building.
And we've had this capital reserve fund for a while now. And if you could just walk us through, kind of the history of it, like where have we spent our money?
Yeah, so we have spent the money on multiple things on the Capital Reserve Fund, from the cistern project at the middle school, which has to do with the fire suppression, as well as currently we put in a scoreboard at the high school for a softball, as well as something as small as maybe the wrestling mats for the high school as well. So it's also, you'll see as you look at the history of it, that it's on infinite IT technology, as well as that. So there's multiple things, both small and big.
So this year, the warrant article asked for voters to expend up to $300,000 from the unassigned fund balance for a deposit into this capital reserve fund. What particular projects is the school board contemplating for the next school year?
So the school board is really looking at safety. So they're looking to address multiple exterior doors at the high school, as well as some aging smoke detectors at the high school. And then we're also looking to match what's an E-rate. So we get almost 50% match from the federal in regards to some information technology. So we're looking to put that towards some internet traffic and switching that would impact all the schools, as well as the switching would be at the high school.
So in that case, it's like a big incentive having that funding in the capital reserve fund. You can get a match from the federal government.
Yeah, the district has done a great job in the past of maxing out the matches, and without kind of this capital reserve fund, it would be harder to do that.
All right, great. So that's it for article number 5. And now we're going to be talking about warrant article number 6, which deals with open enrollment. So Brian, a lot of folks don't know what open enrollment is, and why is it on our warrant this year?
So, Scott, this is a new article that the board chose to bring forward, and we should talk a little bit about what open enrollment is. So since 2009, the New Hampshire laws have allowed open enrollment, which essentially allows students from other districts to enter a school district where they're not residents. So what's before us is the question if Goffstown wants to become an open enrollment district. And Scott, the reason for this primarily has been because there was a recent Supreme Court case between the town of Pittsfield and the New Hampshire State Supreme Court found that any school district that has a student attend an open enrollment district, that the school district is responsible for paying that cost. So this open enrollment article before voters would do two things. It would create Goffstown as an open enrollment district where we would allow 5 students to come in and attend Glen Lake Kindergarten, and it would restrict students not being able to attend other open enrollment districts. And really, if we look at the slide that has the cost information, there's a couple of scenarios that voters should be aware of. So if we had 5 students who chose to attend the Virtual Learning Academy, which is an online school, this is a charter school in the state of New Hampshire, we end up losing adequacy for those students, which is state aid that we received. So 5 students would cost the Goffstown School District around $21,000 and change. However, Scott, if those same 5 students attended an open enrollment school, then that cost could be upwards of $71,000 or more. So right now, there's a number of bills that pertain to open enrollment, and we don't really know where those are going to go, whether that's going to pass the legislative process, whether that will be approved by the governor. But this would essentially create Goffstown as an open enrollment district, allow 5 students in, and restrict the number of students going out.
And Brian, I wanted to back up on a slide that we had up earlier because there was some discussion at the deliberative session about how does this impact families who may be homeschooling or maybe sending their kids to a charter school or using an education freedom account.
Yeah, that's a great question, Scott. So all of those families would have all of those options still. So you can always choose to homeschool your student. You can choose to attend a charter school. You can choose to accept an education freedom account and essentially use that money to buy whatever programming you'd like. So it would not restrict any of those programs.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thank
and again, if there's more information needed on this, please check out our district website. And we have shown that the link to that in previous slides. So if you have any questions, please go to the district website. There's a ton of information there. And if you have any other questions, you can always reach out to your school board members or contact the SAU for more information.